Hello and welcome to CGTN Facebook live stream live from the EU Council. This is of course day 2 of the meeting where 27 EU leaders, because the UK has left, so 27 EU leaders are meeting to discuss big issues. Yesterday they talked about migration in mammoth hour-long talks that went into the night. You can see just there, this is one of the typical kind of journalist huddles. So a representative from Italy is currently briefing journalists. But to discuss migration and of course the topic of today, which is Brexit, joining me now is my lovely team. We have Sebastian from SRF Swiss TV. We also have Mariam, who is an Italian radio journalist.
Hello.
So guys, thank you for joining. And of course, the first thing I want to ask you is, how much sleep have you all had?
Me, 3 hours.
3 hours?
4 hours. I'm the better one today.
So obviously for all our viewers watching, so what happened last night was that there were crisis talks on the EU formulating a migration policy that works for all, you could say. And to give you all the details of what happened last night, we'll kick things off with Maria. So Maria, the floor is yours.
Okay, what's happened? There were different crises at the same time. Italy, with a new government, a bit nationalist and populist one, arrived asking for help to rescue people in the sea, in the Mediterranean. And for them it was a condition to accept the migration chapter. But then during the summit, they in fact revealed and put a bomb on the table saying, no, we are not going to sign anything of the Council, so also things about Russia sanctions, trade, etc., until you accept what we ask. So it was a big threat. And so this is why we didn't sleep, because it went on during all the night. But at the same time, in this summit, there are other crises. There is a huge crisis in Germany, where Chancellor Merkel needs to bring results. Tom, because she has an Minister for Interior who asked to send back to Mediterranean countries, so also Italy, those migrants who were registered in our countries, Mediterranean, and then moved to Germany. So, and this is a real threat, because this minister gave only 2 weeks until beginning of July, I think, to Chancellor Merkel to find a concrete results. Otherwise, he will withdraw his participation to the German government, and so it means we will go towards elections. So there were different crises at the same time. We know that countries from Eastern Europe, we call them the Visegrad group, they didn't want any European agreement on a burden sharing of migrants. And shall I talk about what's happened then, or?
Sure, because we all like to talk, learn about the Visegraders.
Especially when
It looks like Sebastian's a little bit tired.
I'm very tired. I'm much more tired than her.
Okay, so we listen to Maria first and then we join in, yes? Okay, consensus reached.
Okay, I think, I mean, there was an agreement at the end, at just before 5 o'clock a.m. We have a European agreement, so we could say it's good. We still have a Schengen area where people can move freely, not only people, but goods, and in any case, the Schengen agreement. But this agreement, as very often in European councils, satisfy, let's say, everybody. So this is a bit risky. It means that perhaps it's not so strong as everybody now is saying, you know, like the Italian spokesperson. So what's happened? Mr. Macron, the French president, succeed in having some closed center where to register and keep people to understand if they deserve an asylum status, so to protect them as refugees, or not. They are economic migrants, we can send them back, especially to Africa. So he succeeds, but in a very soft way, because it's written in the conclusions that this closed center will be installed in these countries on a voluntary basis, so only if we agree, Italians for instance, respecting, of course, national law. And I know in Italy this is a big problem, because we had already this hotspot, we call them, with European guards, and honestly they didn't work. But why? Because it's very difficult. in this area. You have a Finnish guard arriving in Italy and saying we have to take fingerprints of migrants. Yes, but then there is the Italian police who says, I'm sorry, but I can't oblige a person to take fingerprint if he doesn't, because I can't use the force, the violence. I have to call a judge. And this is the law in Italy. Otherwise, the policeman could go in a trial. You know, so it's very difficult because we don't have a single penal law in Europe. We have all these different jurisdictions. So just to give you an example. But Macron, number one, I will be short. I do everything.
It's perfect.
So, Macron obtained the closed center.
Best briefing I ever had on European migration policy.
Too kind. Macron obtained his closet center, but still we don't know where because nobody wants them, to be honest. Spain today said, but we have already closed center, we don't need them. Number two, Italy is very happy because I don't know why, but it's written in 2 words that after we have rescued people in the sea, we should share efforts in distributing those migrants. It's very general, this sentence.
Sharing doesn't necessarily always work when it comes to migration.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things where there is consensus, especially when it comes to protecting the outside border. And in general, there is a consensus that the policy will become harsher. Even Angela Merkel agrees in a way, you know, she would not say that maybe in that terms, but she agrees that things are moving more in the direction of hardliners like Mr. Kurz in Austria or like Mr. Orban in Hungary. There is one point, of course, open still. It's the question of an obligatory relocation scheme, where you say that there is an obligation for all other EU member states to take over refugees and migrants, or only refugees. There are different ideas from Italy, from Greece, from other arrival countries to their countries, but there are only pledges that could be on a voluntary basis, but not like a really legal system to do so. And this is the whole debate for 3 years now. And I think in that sense, of course, Mr. Salvini and Mr. Conte, the Minister of Interior, and the Prime Minister of Italy, they did not reach what they wanted to reach here at the summit.
Very happy. Huh? Look, they really told us that they are very happy.
The huddle of journalists listening to the Italian representative is still ongoing. Now, what we've seen, as you were saying, so this migration deal that they have reached, it's shown that the EU can act together, at least. They're all on one sort of same page. But are we really sure? Because before this EU summit, so what they're trying to do is to say, okay, North African countries, you're going to have these asylum centres, and you're the ones who are going to really farm out, tell us who is an economic migrant, who is going to be a real asylum seeker, and then we'll take those people in. So it seemed as if that a few North African countries had said, no, we don't want to take part in this, Libya, for example. And so now we have this idea that's been put into these guidelines that says EU countries are going to host these centres. Do you both think, realistically, that these centres aren't maybe going to crop up in North African countries?
I know that this idea has been around for a very long time. It's not something new. This idea has been already during the crisis 2015 discussed, and even before. And so far there are not many centres like this. I think there is one, for example, in Niger of UNHCR, or two, but it's not really a concept that worked so well. For different reasons, for legal reasons, of course, but also for the reason, obviously, who wants to have a center like that? You have to give a lot to a country, or to make a lot of pressure on a country that they agree voluntarily to do that. The Turkey deal, in a way, is a bit the same concept, you know. Turkey has this deal of 2016 with the European Union, where it says that they keep...
Maria, no. We can see that Maria is trying to make a move for the huddle. We will not allow her.
Because this is the spokesperson of the Italian Prime Minister just over there.
Yeah, he's going away. Never mind.
He's going away. So we see the crowd.
There you can see, Hugo, my cameraman, is showing there. That is a spokesperson for the Italian government who is being followed by a whole bunch of journalists. Maria cannot be one of them because she is taking part in this CGTN live stream, unfortunately.
It would be very, very expensive.
journalist here understanding Italian tries to be there. So I don't. I understand a little bit of Italian, but well, anyway.
So I can try to answer to your question that I think everybody knows that there is not a magic solution, and of course, migration is very complicated. What is very hypocrite here, and it's going on for years now, is that European leaders try to avoid the problem, bringing it outside our eyes, outside Europe. So they will probably, with all this money now, there are other 500 million, which basically will go to the Libyan Coast Guard, we have to say, and they come from the, from the European Social Fund. So we take away the money to fight against this employment in Europe, to give it to this Libyan Coast Guard, who I hope do well their job. But I think we'll probably improve this cooperation with African countries. But what is clear is that we will never be able to close the sea, as we have been doing for now decades. I mean, the Europe fortress, it's a myth. It can never happen. And I tell you why. Before, I don't know if you remember, there was a huge accident in the south of Sicily, Lampedusa, I think 3 or 4 years ago, where 360 people died, in the Sicilian coast. And then it was a general shock. Italy created a military operation, Mare Nostrum, so it started putting the ship far near Libya. And then the business of smugglers changed, because they said, indeed, if you come nearer, we give to these smugglers small and weak Chinese boats, which are not planned to arrive till Italy. They just are destroyed after 12 miles. And so it adapted, and it's true that that it's like that today. I don't want to speak about the pull factor, the push factor. Do we attract them? I think the push factor, the African continent wanting to change their destiny, it will be always there. But it's true that if today we manage to perhaps close our border in a very efficient way, which I don't believe it's possible in the sea, they will change their business. They will again produce some boats which will be stronger and allowing these people to try to arrive until Italy or Malta or whatever. So honestly, this is not the way to fight if we have to fight against migration.
So, Sebastian, do you think it's a case of the EU having to maybe not lose its humanity, but put aside its humanity in order to try to control migration into Europe from, for example, the Mediterranean route?
Well, I mean, there is a clear, I think, non-outspoken consensus that European leaders don't want to have too many migrants and refugees here. Of course, I mean, there would be probably ways to stop it, not to zero, but to near zero, if you would have a very brutal, harsh pushback policy as the Australians have it. I mean, theoretically, you could just take every boat and bring it back. Theoretically, you could do that. But that would be against the European Convention on Human Rights. That would be against the International Refugee Law, Geneva Convention. And this is not a step the Europeans want to do. So they want to do whatever harsh they can do on refugees and migrants. But there are certain thresholds I think someone like Angela Merkel would not like to put aside. So this is a bit the situation, you know. But then, of course, I think the situation changed very much, because after the Second World War, of course, we were talking about a very specific group of refugees, and there was a big political will to take them in Europe. And now it's a lot of different reasons. People go away from home, political reasons, war, economic reasons, and there is just this idea in Europe that you cannot take all of them, because if you take all of them, then right-wing parties will be on the rise even more.
And but there is another thing we forget now, because the political debate has completely switched towards asylum, and we don't speak anymore about legal migration.
I mean, what about, for example, is the Dublin regulation that hasn't been reformed as well?
What I was saying is that we need migrants, and European leaders forget to say that. We need migrants because there is a terrible population decrease in Europe. So instead of just talking about asylum and the rest of the words we have to keep them back. We should try to find a way to accept those who can work in Europe.
Yeah, but then it's a completely different approach. And yeah, you cannot like, I think you should not too much mix. One thing is more a human rights, asylum, humanitarian question, and the other thing is a labor market, growth, and so on question. And then you choose different ones. Maybe
because Sebastian, 10 years ago we used to speak about both. Now, because of these wars in the north of Africa, we completely put legal migration aside. So we just look at the conclusion. We just speak about Dublin a little bit and how to send back the rest. So there is no debate about that anymore.
But it's also a very different question according to what country you're talking about. I mean, how many unemployment you have in Italy? 10, 20%, 15%, something like this? 11, okay. I mean, I think in Italy probably unemployment is still an issue. So there would also be more room for employment in Italy. Whereas in Germany, for example, you have a very, very low unemployment. And there, of course, you need engineers, you need also low and high qualified working force. But then, as a country, you want to choose. And you want to maybe have a mix of different cultures, of big background. You want to have people from Asia, people from South America, and you want to choose them. And you want not just say, okay, we take hundreds of thousands from Africa. That's not really how immigration, like an economic-driven immigration policy would work, right?
Well, now you're sounding a little bit like a British person. But no, you're very right in that. Now,
by the accent.
Maybe not the accent.
I understand.
Now, talking about British people, we were meant to have, so Sebastian has a TV husband, he's called Danny Kemp, and he's from the Agence France Presse. We cannot find him in this room, and he, of course, was going to talk to us, give us the lead discussion on Brexit. So I'm going to leave it to these guys now. But before we get on to Brexit, guys, of course, there was a Belgium versus England World Cup match. Who were you guys supporting?
Well, I'm really not too much interested in football. Really not. I was not seeing the match. I know you are a big fan, Mariam. Yeah, I know you are the biggest soccer football fan here in the Brussels bubble. I know that. I'm not. Yeah, you see, I'm not. I mean, when Switzerland is playing, I'm in favor of Switzerland. I'm watching the match, the game. I like it, but I'm not an expert. But just one anecdote. I saw one British journalist, female, from one of the big media in Britain, and she was running around in the press center with like Belgium flag here and everywhere. And this shows a bit like the mood of the British, or some British.
So you think she's trying to get a passport, basically?
I have no idea what her motivation is. We should ask her to come and to join. See, she's somewhere around.
Maybe you can unearth her from somewhere.
I will not disclose who it is, of course.
But anyway, it was a good result for Belgium. Obviously, England lost 1-0 to Belgium yesterday in a result that was probably expected, or English commentators or English players perhaps would say that they did it on purpose. That's one thing. But so they lost.
Are you very sad?
About England losing?
Yes.
I would say not particularly.
Oh my God. You're the same kind of. You're the same kind of.
You're becoming Belgian.
So then let's go to what was discussed today, this morning. So EU leaders, they had a later than expected breakfast. It started at 11 a.m. due to the fact that everyone was up an extra 7 hours last night, and it took them about 3 minutes again to put a stamp on their Brexit conclusions. What does that say about Brexit?
Well, I'm sorry to say, but Brexit has become, for the moment, the most boring issue because nothing is moving forward. I mean, the situation is clear for months. I think when we talked about it last summit, it was more or less the same situation. The EU says what they want, what they don't want. There are some very difficult negotiations on the Brexit issue itself. So on UK leaving, there is one big issue left, not very solved, with the Irish border between Northern Ireland of UK and Ireland, which is part of the EU. And then, of course, on the long run, it's the question, what will be the future deal between the United Kingdom and the EU? Will it be a very close economic cooperation like the EU has it with Norway or with my home country, Switzerland? Will it be far away? And there, we all wait for the British government to set out what they want to have something close, less close, hard, soft Brexit, and as long as there is not really a position of the UK government, it's difficult to move forward. But everyone gets a bit nervous because, I mean, all the companies, not for political but for business reasons, they want to know what happens. Do we have to change our business model? Can we continue as we want? So everyone is a bit nervous, but it's not nervosity here. It's more, I think, in the business crowd all over Europe, all over the world, because, I mean...
Well, the thing is that, I mean, definitely, I mean, all of us, we follow whatever is happening in EU land. I particularly do focus on Brexit. I think you do too. Maria, possibly less...
But
less?
for the same reason Sebastian just mentioned, that
It's
in a way the political challenges are already explained. We are now waiting the way this Brexit will become a reality, and then of course I mean, I completely agree on what you said. I know in Italy there is a big worry about the consequences for some sectors, but we are waiting, and I think Europe has other priorities for the moment.
No, it definitely has had those. And then just finally, any last thoughts, or how would you like to sum up what this summit was? It was billed as a crunch summit. Migration obviously topped the agenda. Did it reach any of its goals?
Well, I mean, on migration, she already said a lot. I mean, there is some, you know, I mean, a summit is, in a way, the European Council, where the leaders meet, is the most important institution in the European Union, because there the leaders are, and the leaders often and always have the last word, and they are those who give the direction of the European Union. But at the same hand, it's not a legal institution. They don't draw legal text, so it's often a bit like, you know, words, like general directions, and then the really interesting questions often are like what the ministers, what the parliament, what the lawmakers make out of that. This will be true for migration, this will be true for other topics. I mean, on migration it's clear, it shows where the road is going, not just from now on, but already from the beginning in direction of harsher policy, I would say. On Brexit, as I said, for the moment it has to be boring. Then there was a Russia decision, but I think we don't want to go into all to the topics that were on the table. And now there is a discussion on the Euro reform, but there also things are like a bit like between and not moving, certainly a big gap forward at this summit.
Okay, well...
If I can say something, perhaps if I want to be a little bit optimistic after this summit, and I don't think only about migration, is the fact that Chancellor Merkel, seeing how difficult it is to reach common decisions with 28, 27 member states, she started officially talking about smaller groups who can take decisions. I mean, we know there are enforced cooperation.
But that is a bit dangerous to start saying, let's have a few breakaway EU states or little mini groups, because then
I think,
it starts
honestly,
people thinking
I think
in a terrible way.
I think it's the only way to progress, because we see how impossible are these summits. It's really impossible to agree with the 27 member states. I mean, one comes from the north, the other one from the south, the other from the east. They are completely different realities. So I think if you want to keep an idea of Europe, few countries should start and then the other can join. I mean, it was like that for the euro, and even if for other reasons is not working as it should, but euro is a success in terms of monetary policy, and the others can join if they want, now that the recession passed. No, I think it's the only way to progress, honestly.
Okay, well, I'm going to have to not let you talk, Sebastian. Thank you to Maria. Thank you to Sebastian, as always. So, our dear viewers, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you for joining us at this Facebook live stream for CGTN at the EU Council. Take care and bye-bye.